Hello and welcome to Conservative to America. I'm your host, Cole Holcomb.
Host Griffin Keffer.
Thank you, Griffin.
Thank you, Griffin.
Today we're going to start off with what we talked about yesterday with the GOP senator debuting a bill to abolish the Department of Education following a Trump campaign promise. A Republican senator introduced a measure to do away with the Department of Education on Thursday after President-elect Trump suggested doing so on the 2024 campaign trail. Senator Mike Rounds, Republican South Dakota, debuted the Returning Education to Our States Act in the Senate, which would abolish the Department of Education and charge various other departments with certain responsibilities and programs that are currently administered by it. During his presidential campaign, Trump said, "One thing I'll be doing very early in my administration is closing up the Department of Education in Washington, D.C., and sending all education and education work it needs to go back to the states." Some experts contested his ability to do this, noting he would need congressional approval. However, with incoming Republican trifecta in Washington, D.C., and Rounds' bill, he might have it. Federal Department of Education has never educated a single student, and it's long past time to end this bureaucratic department that causes more harm than good, Rounds said in a statement. "We all know local control is best when it comes to education. Everyone raised in South Dakota can think of a teacher who played a big part in their educational journey. Local school boards and state departments of education know best what their students need, not unelected bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. For years, I've worked removing the Federal Department of Education. I'm pleased that President Trump shares the vision, and I'm excited to work with him and Republican majorities in the Senate and House to make this a reality. This legislation is a roadmap to eliminating Federal Department of Education by practically rehoming these federal programs in the departments where they belong, which will be critical as we move into next year," he continued. The Democratic National Committee responded to the bill's release by saying Donald Trump is hell-bent on abolishing the Department of Education, and his MAGA lackeys are already pushing legislation to make his disastrous Project 2025, which is not true. I added that in, back to what they're saying. Plans a reality, said DNC spokesperson. Project 2025 was made up. There's a lot of good stuff, but also a lot of bad stuff. Spokesperson Alex Floyd said, referencing the policy agenda spearhead by conservative think tanks. The Heritage Foundation, notably Trump and his campaign, denied any involvement with Project 2025. Between naming unqualified billionaire Linda McMahon, Education Secretary, and launching dangerous broadsides against education funding on the campaign trail, Trump has made crystal clear he'll put our public schools at risk on day one, no matter what shameless attacks Trump and his MAGA enablers lob at students and teachers. Democrats will always fight to protect public education, Floyd continued. And the senators plan a number of Native American education programs will be redirected to the Department of Interior. Loan and grant programs would become the responsibility of the Department of Treasury. Disability programs would be overseen by the Department of Health and Human Services. Career programs would move to the Department of Labor, and the State Department would become responsible for the Fulbright Hays program, which supports research and training efforts overseas. The new bill comes after Trump revealed his plans to tap Linda McMahon, former CEO of World Wrestling Entertainment, WWE, to lead the Department of Education earlier this week. It is my great honor to announce that Linda Mahon, former administrator of the Small Business Administration, will be the United States Secretary of Education, he said in in a statement on this election. Julia Johnson is politics writer for Fox News, which is where we where we found this article, and where we got our not got our ideas for this app and understood what's going on down there. I don't know. Griffin, I'd like to hear your opinion on this. Hold on, Griffin. Mike didn't come on. Okay, go
Okay,
ahead.
go ahead. I think it's a good thing because what I'm reading about Department of Education right now and what I've read, uh, it lacks the potential misuse of funds, which is not good for schools because schools need to have the correct number of funds. 'Cause if they don't, then they can't keep the school going correctly, and they're not equipped with a set of guidelines. Directors also lack the staff and financial expertise.
I'm gonna have to
I'm gonna have to.
disagree with you there, Griffin, on that one. I'll let you come back here in a minute and talk on that. But either way, though, the Department of Education, as he said, it's a bunch of bureaucrats getting checks to put a staple on a piece of paper. The Department of Education is terrible. It needs to be destroyed. It needs to be ridden of. It is absolutely terrible. It has infiltrated the minds of our children and the minds of American children. It has ruined the idea in America of freedom, of capitalism. The Department of Education is everything that America isn't. It's unelected bureaucrat dictatorship in our education system that does not push true history. It's by people educated at Yale and Harvard with this liberal agenda that they push. It's absolutely terrible. The Department of Education should have never been created. It goes against the rights that states have. Education is one of the rights that states have. It's terrible that this that they would recommend taking away this program. In my opinion, I mean not that they were. It's terrible that they would create this program. It's great that they would bring in this program. That they're getting rid of the program. It's great that they're getting rid of this program and this group. It's terrible. Uh, but as I said, uh, the Department of Education is probably the worst department in all of in every single one of the departments. I imagine that, in my opinion, I think the Department of Education is terrible. It needs to be returned to the states. As they said, they're going to reallocate funding and give some of these jobs to different areas. There's a whole bunch of jobs that the Department of Education has. I'll tell you this: whenever somebody gives credit on their valedictorian speech, they say thank you to their teacher. I never hear anybody say, "Oh, well, thank you to the head of the Department of Education." Uh, oh, thank you to my school superintendent. Thank you to these Board of Education members, blah, blah, blah. And they say thank you to the teachers. The teachers are the ones that are actually getting the job done, but yet they're not the ones getting the salaries. It's the people up at the Department of Education making 150 grand a year, having 200,000 employees, all living in Virginia, turning Virginia blue, as I said earlier in today's podcast, turning a red state blue, and then they ruin education for American children, and they steal the money that should be going to teachers. But there's tons of money that is just wasted into the Department of Education. I am all for education. I'm all for that there needs to be a good public education for children who cannot afford a private school. But there cannot be a Department of Education. It gets in the way of a state education. It tells states what they can and cannot teach. I think that if a state wants to teach creation, if a state wants to put the Ten Commandments in schools, if a state wants to, uh, I don't know, have prayer in schools, that's totally fine, in my opinion. That's totally fine, according to the Constitution, even, because that's up to the state, not the government. I yield back. Griffin, you can go on with what you were going to say.
Okay. Yeah. I'm starting to read what you are all talking about, and yeah, I totally agree with you. I'm starting to see that funding is actually not a problem. The school takes all the money from the teachers, and the teacher. That's why teachers don't get paid. In my personal opinion, I think teachers should get paid a lot, because if you think about it, they do a lot of work. They go through a lot of stress with their students, and they had to go through a lot of college to get to be where they are. So, in my personal opinion, I think teachers should be getting paid good, and it shows that kids are actually saying they don't get taught well and they don't learn much. Back to you, Cole.
Well, no, that's the crazy thing too, is that teachers they'll go on strike over the government about how they're not getting paid enough. Well, really, what the government needs to do in these situations is take paychecks away from the people like on the Board of Education, like people who are superintendents, all these government bureaucrats who are working down at the Department of Education, State Department of Education, National Department of Education, make 100 grand a year pushing a piece of paper around. And let's get that money allocated to the teachers, the people who are actually making a difference in people's lives. not the guy who puts a staple in a piece of paper and writes an email every day to somebody. Uh, we need to get that money to the teachers who are actually making a difference in children's lives. Uh, but I don't really think that it's a deal with that it has to deal with the funding that teachers are getting and that education is getting. I think it has to deal with how we are not allocating the funding properly, how the Department of Education is allocating the funding properly, about how they have 200, 100, 200, 150,000, 200,000 employees that are making 100 grand a year to put a staple in a piece of paper. It's crazy. But with all that being said, let's go ahead and move on to other departments getting cut. The department known as ATF. What does ATF stand for? It stands for alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. Well, a representative, as I talked about earlier, is trying to get rid of uh, the Department of ATF. They're presenting that on the floor because they say it infringes with the Second Amendment. And what this representative is saying is that I agree with him on this. We need to get rid of it. He says that it infringes on the Second Amendment, and the rules that this committee has, this department has, need to go back to the states. It's all about states' rights. These are states' fundamental rights that they are allowed and that they are granted in the Constitution. The government should not be infringing on these rights. It's just crazy that the government is infringing on the rights of the American people. But something like ATF, yeah, that needs to come to an end. There are some good things that ATF does, but you can reallocate those to other departments, and you can cut a bunch of government jobs that are wasted taxpayer dollars and turn them Virginia blue and Maryland more blue. It's crazy. But Griffin, I'd like to hear your take.
Yeah, I don't think the government should have anything to do with, like, I think the state should make their decisions, not the government. The government should not make the decisions for the states. Because when they do that, the states are going to get mad and the people are going to be mad. So it's just not a good idea from the government. But I do like the idea of banning tobacco because tobacco is ruining kids. I'm not going to lie, because at my school, a lot of kids vape and do a bunch of bad stuff. I'm sick of it. Tobacco, I think, needs to go. Alcohol and firearms, no, because you'll make a lot of people mad with that. Tobacco, not as much as those. But back to you, Cole.
Thanks, Griffin. I'd like to go ahead and talk about this just for a little second. Trump nominates Scott Bessent as Treasury Secretary. Picks Russ Vought to lead the budget office. Uh, but let's go over to Democracy 2024. Election results 2024. Sorry that I had to jump over to this, guys. Griffin, you're not able to see it, but just look up election results 2024 on your thing. But so, guys, as let's go over to the U.S. House race right now. So currently, the U.S. House stands at 213. Griffin, are you looking at it right now? Hold on. Wait, let me hear you. You looking at it right now, Griffin?
Looking at it right now, Griffin. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so in the U.S. House race, there's still two seats that have left to be uncalled. Uh, there are. Let me. That seat where a Republican is leading, John Duarte to Adam Gray. It's 50-50 tied. Last time I looked at it, it was less than a few hundred votes, that race. 213 to 219. Then there's that race in Iowa that's currently in recount with Miller Meeks. She's already declared victory. Still unsure, though. But the Republicans will probably return with that 220, 221 majority. We flipped that seat in Alaska. But it's not looking as good as what it is with the presidency and the Senate. Let's go over to the Senate. So, to the U.S. Senate, all those races were called about a week ago. Uh, Other than yesterday, a lot of major networks did not call the race in Pennsylvania until yesterday. It was in recount. But uh, Bob Casey finally, finally, after 3 weeks, he finally conceded the race. Maybe 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, Bob Casey finally conceded the race, and we all said it was about time. But that was good. After 2 weeks, he finally conceded the race to Dave McCormick, and Dave McCormick will officially be the junior senator from the great state of Pennsylvania. And then, of course, Montana, West Virginia, Ohio. But there were 4 flips in the Senate. That's good. We're looking at now 2026 midterms. Uh, Good chance we'll flip that seat in Georgia if the Republicans do what they're supposed to. So I think 2026 midterms, there were a lot of seats that could have, that Republicans should have put more money in. McConnell put a whole lot of money towards Maryland. We should have not done that in Maryland. That was an unwinnable race. Yeah, it looks good, but still, it was an unwinnable race. We could have put money into New Jersey. That would have been more winnable. And money into Michigan, money into Wisconsin, money into uh, Arizona, money into Nevada. We should have pushed money into these races like nobody's business. Even money into that race in Virginia with Huncow, and I think that we would have won more seats in the Senate. But McConnell did not do it, and that's another reason why he's probably leaving the U.S. Senate right now. But that's all cool, good, cool. Let's go ahead and uh, move back over. I did not realize that or die is still in there, but that's from the Live Free or Die podcast. Whoopsie. Um, but Griffin, you got anything else that you saw in the news today that you'd like to talk about?
Well, no, I've been looking, but it's a lot of it we've already covered, so I don't really have anything to talk about.
Okay, well, with all that being said, it's a great day to be a Republican. Smiling faces all across the GOP right now, all across the Grand Old Party, all across the Republican Party. And remember to come back and continue to watch our episodes, our shorts, from Live Free or Die to the K&H Angle to Keffer PrimeTime with Griffin Keffer is the main host of that. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning on today. And remember to continue to watch Conservative to America, America's #1 teen news podcast. I'm your host, Cole Holcomb, signing off. Thank you and good night.